Okay, let's talk about that moment. That incredibly confusing, sometimes stressful, sometimes exciting moment that so many of us go through. You're waiting, you're wondering, and your body starts sending out all these weird signals. Is it the start of your period? Or could it be something else entirely? Welcome to the ultimate symptom detective game, pregnancy or period. Does this sound familiar? You're feeling exhausted for no reason, maybe a little crampy, and your moods are just all over the map. You start second-guessing every little twinge and craving. It's that classic what if that sends you down a rabbit hole of internet searches, right? Well, you're not alone. Let's get our detective hats on and actually start piecing this puzzle together.
So, why is this so darn tricky? The biggest reason is that the very first signs of pregnancy and the classic symptoms of PMS can feel, well, practically identical. And no, you're not imagining it. There is a very real biological reason for this frustrating overlap. So, before we can tell the clues apart, we first need to understand the culprits behind the whole mix-up. To really get to the bottom of this mystery, we have to look at who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. And when it comes to your cycle and potential pregnancy, the usual suspects are, you guessed it, hormones. Let's meet our two main players, estrogen and progesterone. Think of them as the managers of your reproductive system. After you ovulate each month, their levels shoot up. Their job is to get the lining of your uterus all thick and cozy, basically preparing a welcoming home just in case a fertilized egg decides to move in. Now, here's where the road splits. If an egg isn't fertilized, those hormone levels take a nosedive. That sharp drop is the signal that triggers your period. But if an egg is fertilized and successfully implants, those hormone levels don't drop. Instead, they stay high and keep rising to support the new pregnancy. The confusion happens because in both scenarios, right before your period and in very early pregnancy, your body is experiencing a surge of these exact same hormones. It's the same cause, leading to the same effects, at least for a little while. All right, now that we know who our hormonal culprits are, it's time to really dig into the evidence. We're going to put the most common symptoms side by side under a microscope and hunt for those subtle little details that can help tell them apart. And let's start with the most obvious, and yet most confusing clue of all. The very first piece of evidence we need to examine is bleeding. Now, you might think any bleeding at all automatically means period, case closed, but that's not always true. In fact, very early pregnancy can also cause a specific type of light bleeding called implantation bleeding. So how on earth do you tell the difference? Okay, let's break this down. The differences are subtle but super important. First up, color. Implantation bleeding is usually a very light pink or maybe a rusty brown color, kind of like old blood. Period blood, on the other hand, is typically that familiar bright to dark red. Next is the amount, and this is a huge giveaway. Implantation bleeding is really just light spotting. We're talking a few drops, not even enough to need a pad. A period, as you know, is a real flow that requires protection. Then there's duration. Implantation spotting is a short-lived event, usually lasting just 1 to 3 days, and it can be on and off. Your period sticks around for 3 to 7 days. And finally, a key piece of evidence, clots. You won't see any clots with implantation bleeding, but you might with your period. Let's move on to our second major clue, cramps. This is another big point of confusion because, let's face it, a cramp can feel like a cramp. Both your period and early pregnancy can cause that familiar discomfort in your lower belly. But the quality and intensity of that pain can actually be a really useful clue. So what's the difference? Well, think of early pregnancy cramps as being much milder, almost like a whisper. They're often described as little pulling sensations, tingles, or light pricks in the lower abdomen. They come and go. Period cramps, though, they tend to be much more intense. They're caused by your uterus contracting to shed its lining, so the pain is often a throbbing or sharp ache that can even radiate into your lower back and down your thighs. They tend to be more constant and usually get worse right as your period is starting. Beyond bleeding and cramps, which are the headliners, there's a whole supporting cast of other symptoms that can show up. And while these can overlap too, looking at them all together can really help paint a much clearer picture of what's actually happening in your body. Let's talk about sore breasts. It's super common with PMS for your breasts to feel a bit sore, heavy, or tender. But here's the key. That feeling usually fades away pretty quickly once your period actually starts. With early pregnancy, the tenderness is often on another level. It's more pronounced, your breast might feel fuller and heavier, and the sensitivity doesn't just go away. It tends to stick around and sometimes even gets more intense as the days go by. All right, what about nausea and food cravings? While some people might feel a little queasy with PMS, actual nausea, what everyone calls morning sickness, even though it can happen at any time of day, is a classic sign of early pregnancy. And the cravings are different too. PMS cravings usually have you reaching for comfort foods, right? Chocolate, chips, carbs, the usual suspects. Pregnancy cravings can be way more specific and bizarre. But even more telling are food aversions. Suddenly, the smell of coffee that you used to love makes you sick. That's a big clue. And finally, let's look at that bone-deep exhaustion and the emotional roller coaster. Feeling tired before your period is definitely a real thing, but it usually gets a lot better once your period starts. Pregnancy fatigue, however, is a whole different beast. It can be an extreme, persistent exhaustion, all thanks to those soaring progesterone levels. It's the kind of tired where you could fall asleep sitting up. And it's the same story with mood swings. PMS can make you irritable or weepy for sure, but it's temporary. In pregnancy, those heightened emotions can be an ongoing symptom for weeks. Okay, we've gone through all the common, generally harmless clues. But now we absolutely need to pause the detective work and talk about a very serious plot twist. Sometimes, symptoms that seem like a period or early pregnancy can actually be your body's alarm bell for a medical emergency that you cannot ignore. We need to talk about what's called an ectopic pregnancy. This is when a fertilized egg implants somewhere it's not supposed to, usually in one of the fallopian tubes. This is a very dangerous situation because the pregnancy can't survive, and if it's not treated, the fallopian tube can rupture. That can cause life-threatening bleeding internally. This is why knowing the warning signs is so incredibly important. So please pay very close attention to these red flags. The most critical warning sign is severe, sharp, and persistent pain on one side of your lower abdomen. Not general cramping, but a specific one-sided pain. Other major red flags are significant vaginal bleeding, which could be heavier or even lighter than a normal period, feeling dizzy, weak, or actually fainting, and a really strange one, pain in the tip of your shoulder. If you experience these symptoms, especially that sharp one-sided pain, you need to seek medical help immediately. This isn't a wait-and-see situation.
And beyond an ectopic pregnancy, there are a few other general red flags your body might send you. Any sudden, unusually severe pain in your pelvis is a reason to call a doctor. Same goes for pain that gets worse when you move or press on your stomach, if you develop a fever, or if you notice any foul-smelling vaginal discharge. These could be signs of an infection or other serious issues that need to be evaluated by a professional. So, we've examined all the evidence, we've identified the hormonal culprits, and we've covered the really serious warnings. After all of that, what's the final verdict? Well, it all boils down to one simple but powerful thing: learning to listen to your body and then taking clear, simple steps. So what should you actually do? Here's your game plan. Step 1, become a better detective. Start tracking your symptoms. Make notes on your phone about the timing, color, and amount of any bleeding, and really pay attention to the intensity and location of your cramps. Step 2, if your period is late and you think there's a chance you could be pregnant, the most reliable and easiest first move is to take a home pregnancy test. And step 3, and this is the most important, always talk to a doctor. Whether it's to confirm a pregnancy or to figure out what's going on, a doctor is your best resource. And remember, if you experience any of those red flag symptoms we just talked about, don't wait. Contact a doctor immediately. If you walk away from this with just one key piece of information, let it be this. The biggest clue of all is the timeline. Period symptoms are temporary. They're like the opening act for your period. And once the main show begins, they pack up and leave. Pregnancy symptoms, on the other hand, are just the beginning. They stick around and they often get stronger and more noticeable over time. Ultimately, every single body is different, and your own experience might not fit perfectly into every single box we've described. The goal here isn't to perfectly diagnose yourself at home. The goal is to become an informed, empowered detective for your own health. Your body is communicating with you constantly, sending you messages all the time. The real question is, are you ready to tune in and listen to what it has to say?